For Easter Friday, it is an appropriately cloudy and dim afternoon, but what better kind of afternoon for what's happening at the tavern? Now, I should clarify, I say what better because I love cloudy, overcast afternoons. I love rainy afternoons. They're an absolute joy. So I'm not trying to say that there's doom or gloom happening here. If anything, quite the opposite. So let's get into what's happening at the tavern. It is it is a long weekend, or at least, it is here in Australia. So I don't want to keep you too long. I mean, admittedly this is going to be coming out next week, but your time's at a premium and I'll respect that. First of all, I had an incredible commercial coaching session with Lynn Wissner this week. Apologies, Mary, if I've mangled the sibilance on your last name as well, if that's a Z rather than an S. It's been a long week, so I can't quite recall. But this is following up a recommendation that I got from Sissy Jones years ago. And I have been remiss in getting around to it, but I really wish I had done it earlier. I'm going to be pointing the Tavern of Voices audience at Mary Lynn Wissner and keeping you up to date with where you can get in contact with her, because the way that she provides a clear template for how to approach commercial voiceover, so good, so good. And she is that worth connecting with, that worth receiving the wisdom of, that I was up from 3 a.m. on Wednesday morning to 6 a.m. for the webinar, and I was so jazzed, I was so electrified through it that did basically 75% of the work of battling the fatigue. So that was incredible. As per the thumbnail for this video, I've been doing a lot of work on Tavern Blackjack as well. I'm so glad that I'm recording this today and not yesterday. See, not letting perfect be the enemy of good, which we're going to come back around to in a second. But yeah, I'm glad that I'm doing this today and not yesterday, because yesterday I was doing important work and deep work, but it felt like, that feeling sometimes where you feel like you were just running through marshmallow and you're not fucking getting anywhere. Well, that was yesterday. I was doing things that were really valuable, that were an important thing, but I felt like I wasn't moving the needle because I wasn't clearing out cards from my issue tracking software. Because I've done something that I should have done a little while back and actually sat down and gone, hang on a minute. If I need this to be finished by this date, I need a burn chart. I need to put a burn chart together for this. And I've finally put a burn chart together. For those of you not familiar with software development, basically, a burn chart is about tracking your velocity. And by that, I mean, like, what is your rate of progress? So I deal primarily just with cards that are specific features that I'm developing. For example, one of them is, can I ask Tavern Blackjack, what are my options currently? That's a card. And so I haven't gotten to the point yet of weighting these cards in terms of effort, because it is just me. And I track time against these cards as well. But velocity is all about essentially how many cards am I clearing over time? How many do I need to clear in order to complete this by the date that I want to finish it by? And so I finally put one of those together. And I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. For a lot of this week, I was trying to think, where's the time going? Like, what am I doing? But today I'm feeling a lot better, because I was able to on the back of basically the work that I've done earlier this week, I was able just to go tick, 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 and just get rid of a few cards early today that, still need a little bit of polish, but they are Dunskies. And so that was a really great feeling. The work that I've done that's taken a while to do is I've essentially put together the aesthetic layer for the game. I've added just a scratch version, but I've added just a scratch version of the voice and some sound effects and some ambience, and good Lord, the difference that it makes is incredible. So let's see if we can do a little bit of trickery and time travel and provide a contrast here. So here's what it sounds when you open up the skill, when it's just the text and the ambience, text to speech.
Welcome to Tavern Blackjack. Our casino permits between 1 and 5 players at the table. How many players will be playing today?
Okay, and here's what it sounds like when you have the full voice in there as well. Welcome to Tavern Blackjack. Our casino permits between 1 and 5 players at the table. How many players will be playing today? Okay, so to me, it's still like I still need to go through and polish up that VO. I haven't done any mastering on it at all. It's literally just going through and trying to bang it out. But the difference to me is amazing. I was just sitting there giggling away, going, "Oh, it's so good." Even when I added the ambience layer on top of text to speech, made such a difference in terms of just creating the basic feeling, that basic premise of being in a space. So that felt really good. So yeah, I've been working on the aesthetic layer for that. I've put together the burn chart. There's been a lot of work happening on Tavern Blackjack, so that's been taking up a lot of time. I've also been working on some plans around creating some more video content and content in general that I'm going to talk about a little bit more in the future. Still not quite the right time for it yet, but I've been tinkering away with some exciting stuff, and I've got some plans in the future. For those of you who like the work that the Tavern does and are keen to find ways to support it, there are going to be some avenues for that hopefully will give you something in return as well, coming down the track. So yeah, more on that soon. Not just yet, but soon. So I talked about not letting perfect be the enemy of good, and that has been a real theme this week. I have been trying as much as possible to not get in my own head and stop something or rework something just because it isn't exactly how I wanted it to be. And I think that that's serving me at the moment. We'll find out down the track if not, but I think it's a really useful idea to keep in mind and a really useful principle to cleave to, because the alternative to that is just to get paralyzed by perfection. And I've definitely been there in the past. When I'm working on my own stuff especially, I definitely hit a point where I'm like, oh God, it's not good enough. This could be better. I need to rework that. I need to do it again and again and again. Whereas it's so much easier, and I've talked about this when I've been doing coaching sessions for voice talent as well, it is so much easier to evaluate honestly, and that's an important thing. It needs to be an honest evaluation. When you're doing work for a client, it's so much easier to think to yourself, does that pass muster? Was that good enough? Yeah, that is good enough. That is a solid result. I can see how it could be perfect, but this client wants it. They don't want perfect. They want it. They want it good. And so you get it out the door instead of going and revising and revising and revising, because getting stuff done, getting stuff out the door, like that's what it's all about. Like if we don't do that, then we don't have results. So yeah, that's been something that's been underpinning a lot, especially around some of the early stuff that I've been doing around this video content that I'm working on as well. Yeah, and I think it's a good thing to keep in mind. I have a rate card now for my own work. I have not had a rate card for the longest time, which is terrible. But thanks to our incredible social media manager, I now have a really, really schmick looking rate card that I'm super proud of, and I can now put in front of clients, and it is already reducing the amount that I need to think about things. I got approached by someone on LinkedIn earlier this week in the evening. I got a message about 6:30 in the evening. I don't check LinkedIn all the time. I have, for most of my apps, especially LinkedIn, I have my notifications turned off. You might be able to hear some neighbors in the background, by the way, because it's a public holiday and I haven't closed the door to in here, so some sound might carry from the common driveway. We'll see how we go. You might pick it up, you might not. But yeah, I got approached on LinkedIn from a client who is in a region that is notorious for lowball rates. And they said, look, we need this e-learning. The project size is this much. We can do it for this much. And initially, my gut response was just to go, that's a lowball figure. It's not worth it. But then I looked at it, and I cracked open my rate card, and I thought, oh, actually, that is actually close to an acceptable rate. And so I responded back, and I said, look, I can do it for this. So I put it up at my rate. I said, I can do it for this, and I'll need 50% upfront. because that's my policy for working with new clients. And sure enough, they paid through. I let it go. I wasn't sure which way it was going to go. I actually did go and record the voiceover in the meantime. I went and recorded it just in case, because then I didn't have to worry about staying performance ready for the rest of the evening. I could kind of de-stress. I recorded, but I didn't edit. Editing was only a small piece of work. But then I was like, well, if I get the PayPal notification, which is an app I do allow notifications for on my phone, if I get the PayPal notification, then fine, let's go through. Let's do it. And sure enough, it came through, and so I did the work. So if I hadn't have had the rate card, if I hadn't have had this codified set of not hard and fast rules, but principles around sort of this is how much I work for, then I would have turned away. I would have turned away that gig for being lowball. So I'm super happy to have the rate card, and I'm super happy that I made that decision. I feel a lot better for it. There was a couple of other things I wanted to talk about. And this kind of goes back to not letting perfect be the enemy of good. Another mental trap I've been dealing with recently, and maybe you've had it too, is I've had this weird narrative in my head of, what if it's not good enough? What if what I'm doing is not good enough? And tying it back to what we're talking about this week, Tavern Blackjack rather, I legitimately had the thought, like a little voice popped in my head and said, oh, I'm not sure about putting like voiceover in there. What if the voiceover isn't good enough? Like, what if it's bad? And, I think that may have been part of why it took me a while to get to the aesthetic layer of the game. Like, that might have been basically something that was creating this mental roadblock that I wasn't pushing hard enough against. And I sat down for a moment and I thought, well, fuck, Kevin, if the voiceover for the game isn't good enough, well, there's a lot of things that need to be revisited, including, I would suggest, your entire career. So, yeah, I realize it's probably, it's a narrative that's not really worth paying attention to there. Put it in there. If it doesn't pass muster, make it better. Iterate on it. Get it better again and again and again. And it was just a first draft of voiceover as well. But I've had this in the weirdest places. I picked up a game on Kickstarter that I'm going to be playing this weekend with my partner, Decaying Orbit. I don't have it here with me, but it is a card game that is a collaborative storytelling game that is about a space station exploring its memories in its last few moments before getting pulled into the orbit of the sun in this system to try and figure out what happened. And 100%, 150% up my alley. So good. But I've had this voice in my head. What if the story that we tell isn't good enough? Like, where's the bar for that? It's ridiculous. Where is the bar for how good a collaborative piece of storytelling that you're doing just to have fun needs to be? But it got in there, this real fear of creating. And I've had that with a lot of things. I really have to shadow box with this narrative a lot of the time to try and work around it. It's insidious. So maybe you are facing that as well in some way, and I think it's worth sitting down and looking at ways, how can I come at that sideways? How can I start making stuff and just getting around that fear? Because if you don't, what are your choices? Your choices are listen to that narrative and not make stuff, or just make stuff and deal with the imperfection. And 9 times out of 10, I will guarantee you, at least based on my own personal experience, the result that you get at the end, you are happy with, you are more than happy with, you are ecstatic about. I remember very briefly, and then I'll close up with a couple of things, because I've been reading a book that I just wanted to share a couple of sections from. I bought the Feng Shui RPG in my early 20s, and I was a huge fan of John Woo bullet operas, of wuxia cinema, just ate it up. Like that, basically, loved it. Bullet operas, 100%. Hong Kong action, absolutely. And then later on, sort of Korean action with stuff like Volcano High. Yeah, more, gimme. But I had this narrative in my head of, what if I run a game and it's not good enough? If it's not evocative enough of all of the things in my head, and I wasn't able to let go of that internal voice for the longest time, and so it sat on a shelf. And then when I ran a game, we had the best time. It was so much fun. I'm not going to say that what I ran was incredible, but what I am going to say is that I really wish that I had not listened to the fear inside my head and just had fun. Just allowed myself to be a little sloppy, a little imperfect in that realization, that execution of what was in here. Because then, you iterate. You run the next game and you learn from what's before and it's better. Yeah. It's been something I've been dealing with for a long time. Whew. So yeah, I've been reading Creativity by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, which is that is the pronunciation of his name that I remember from the last presentation I saw that was around his work. And I just wanted to share a couple of things that I thought were pertinent. The first here, page 98. So physicist Freeman Dyson. So this is something that kind of really stood out to me this week, and I'll talk about why in a second. But Freeman Dyson is talking about the importance of being idle. So when asked about the current work he was working on at a point in time, says, "I'm fooling around not doing anything, which probably means that this is a creative period, although of course you don't know that until afterward. I think that it is very important to be idle. I mean, they always say that Shakespeare was idle between plays. I'm not comparing myself to Shakespeare, but people who keep themselves busy all of the time are generally not creative. So I am not ashamed of being idle." So I was up from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. this week on that webinar. And the rest of Wednesday after that, like I went to sleep. Afterwards, I got some rest. But the rest of Wednesday was still like a pretty hectic, pretty busy day. And after that, it was really hard to accept that I had to spend some time recharging. I am years old. And to be honest, I'd actually deal better nowadays with all-nighters or late nights than I did in my 20s. But all the same, you've got to refill the tank. Like, that's a big ask of the body. It's a big ask of the mind. And it was really hard to let go of the fact. It was really hard to let go of the usual momentum that I try and carry through the week and realize, no, I've got to stop here. I've got to actually pump the brakes for a second and recharge, because that cost me. It was a worthwhile cost to pay. Boy, was it worthwhile, but I've got to refill the tank. So last night I wanted to go and do some work on some side project stuff. But it was later in the evening. It was around about 9 by that point in time. And I had this itch in my head where I'm like, I just want to move the needle a little further for today. And my partner, bless her, was like, well, or you could just sit down here and play a video game and just rest up and, have an early night for tomorrow. And that's what I ended up doing. And I think that's made a massive improvement to today. I went to bed earlier than I normally go to bed. I got a good 8 hours of sleep. I probably could have done with more, to be honest, as well. But it made a massive difference. But it's really hard to do that. To just let go of that urge to just go forwards. There's a couple of books I want to talk about in the future. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's banked up that I want to talk about, but there's a couple of books in specific that I think I've mentioned in the past. Off the Clock and Rest, that I want to share some stuff with you all on in the future. There we go. There's our low power warning. Hopefully that hasn't affected the recording. We'll find out if it has. Okay, the other thing I wanted to share here, and this is a little aspirational, but man, did it make my soul sing hearing this today. So this is talking about sort of, what you do in your life, because Mihaly is talking about or acknowledging that there is potentially this feeling of, or the potential of privilege in the lives of these people who are doing these things that just fill them up. But he kind of talks about, I'll let it speak for itself. You too can spend your life doing what you love to do. After all, most of the people we interviewed were not born with a silver spoon in their mouth. Many came from humble origins and struggled to create a career that allowed them to keep exploring their interests. Even if we don't have the good fortune to discover a new chemical element or write a great story, the love of the creative process for its own sake is available to all. It is difficult to imagine a richer life. That really made my soul sing hearing that, because, I mean, to be frank for a moment, and then we'll wrap up and I'll let you go on your way, and we'll be 5 minutes shorter than usual. I'm definitely dealing with some pressures and some stresses at the moment. There are things going on where, things are in flux, and I'm definitely dealing with some uncertainty. I'm definitely moving towards where I want to be, but I'm not necessarily where I want to be in terms of stability at the moment. Let's say that. But you know what? I have a runway in front of me, and I have never felt more vital. I have never felt more realized. I have never felt more the kind of person that I wanted to be. And that's not in terms of the trappings of who am I working with? What am I doing? It's about the daily experience of being me. What is my routine throughout the day? Because, the difference in terms of prestige of work, that's just basically the names that you're working with. The work remains the same. And I'm already pretty happy with, where I am in terms of like that level of things professionally, but it's just the texture of like, what is my daily routine? What kind of things am I doing? What am I open to? Am I open to possibility? Am I open to being aware of what's happening around me? All of that stuff. So hopefully that sort of sparked a little something or resonated for you as well. All right, this has been What's Happening at the Tavern. Thank you for listening. I hope you've had a wonderful Easter by the time this comes around. See you again soon.